Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and we're producing this episode for GoodCrowd.info. And I am so excited to have my great friend, my long-term friend, Doug Ellenoff here. He's one of the world's true experts in the world of equity crowdfunding, and some of the branding is changing. We use new names, but using the general solicitations under Title II of the Jobs Act, the Reg D 506C and Regulation A+. Doug is the expert. He's created a new product, iDisclose, to help people create low-cost, highly compliant, very effective PPMs, offering memorandum. We're so glad to have you, Doug. Thank you for joining us.
I wouldn't miss it, Devin. It's been too long. It's nice to see your audience again, and it's great talking to you.
Yeah, this is exciting timing. Obviously, this product has broad application and across circumstances for entrepreneurs wanting to raise money, including very traditional 506C or 506B kinds of offerings, right? But I get excited about this world of crowdfunding, and it looks like the SEC may actually issue rules on crowdfunding under Title III in the next few weeks, and this is relevant to that. So tell us about iDisclose. What the heck is it?
Well, I mean, you've lived in the Jobs Act world where all these crowdfunding provisions originate from as long as I have. And one of the things that we have heard as a rationale as to why Title III crowdfunding hasn't moved forward as quickly as you and I would have liked is the concern that there may not be responsible disclosure of the investment opportunity to investors because the legal costs involved are considerable. And I come from the school of thought where there's a problem, there needs to be a solution. And that's what iDisclose is all about. It is our law firm's statement, along with Georgia Quinn, who's really the driving force behind it, but the law firm has spent a lot of time working with her on it, which is our way of saying Title III can be done responsibly. This is a tool that will reallocate the work effort largely back to the entrepreneur, which will save time, money, and energy from the lawyers, put it back on the entrepreneur where it ought to be. And then there needs to be a qualified lawyer at the end of the process to review it and make sure it's actually finally done. But between the readjustment of most of the work to being to the entrepreneur and a qualified lawyer looking at it at the end of the day, we're quite comfortable that the Title III disclosure will give investors an appropriate amount of information, both as to the legal complexities of what they need to disclose and financial as well.
This really is exciting. And I realize that there are entrepreneurs out there who are overwhelmed by the prospect of sitting down at a computer and entering this information themselves. But I would just remind them that a $20 an hour technical writer that helps them do this is much more affordable than an attorney. And they can feed all of the information orally to a technical writer who could do this for them, still has the opportunity to save them a tremendous amount of money. Don't you think?
Absolutely, which is why we've done it. But the other thing that we did, and I apologize, is we went out of our way to say over and over again, how do we keep this simple? We lose as developers of this application if in fact people don't feel comfortable completing it. If the user experience is unsatisfactory, then we haven't done our jobs right. So the model is a TurboTax-like model where we have kept the request for information simple and in very limited steps, as well as there are tooltips along the way to help the entrepreneur be guided gently and encouragingly. But if for whatever reason they get snagged on a concept, a term, there are what we call hover texts that explain things. There's a way to collaborate with your colleagues or your counsel because we don't want people to feel isolated and trapped. This is an interactive process, so that at the end of the day, we've had enough people play with it who feel that we've accomplished that task, although hopefully you'll have lots of people who will want to use it and will continue to improve it to make it as simple as possible for people. But I think your suggestion that on certain aspects of the business section, yeah, they could by all means, like a business plan, have a less expensive creative writing person sit with them and populate those sections of our application much more cost effectively.
Yeah, this is really, I just get excited thinking about this because the legal work.
And I'm going to let you market it for me.
Well, the legal work is on an offering for especially for early stage entrepreneurs, which is where those who are looking to raise less than $1 million through a Title III crowdfund offering are. Often these are some of the very first dollars in. It may be the first non-founder dollars coming into the business. Spending $5,000 or $10,000 on the legal work is scary, but possible. Spending $40,000 or $50,000 on legal work, it may just simply be impossible. And then when you marry that with audit fees, it becomes overwhelming. And so if you have a solution on the legal, I'm excited. And I think there are solutions coming on the audit side as well. So this just enables such an important part of our economy. But tell us a little bit about how you see the investors taking advantage of this after the entrepreneurs have done it.
Right. I just want to add a little more
go ahead.
To what you talked about right there. So if the responsible cost for doing a private placement memorandum in a 506B context is in the range that you talk about, 25, 35 and up, depending on the size of the law firm and the complexity of your own business and the history and the due diligence, we do think this tool will drop that number considerably. The tool itself is $5,000. We have lawyers who are willing to finish it off because they've become comfortable with the application and the quality of the end product already for a similar number, maybe slightly more. So all in, you're in around, let's call it 12.5 to 15 versus 35 and up, which is not an unreasonable number. And so, yes, that's the value proposition of the tool. And we think that they're in a Title III environment. We are going to customize what we've done for 506B, and we are going to make it a Title III compliant tool. And that'll be slightly less expensive, truthfully, because it's a little less involved. It'll be just as sophisticated, but a little less involved. And so from our point of view, it's been exciting to work on this for 9 months with Georgia, as well as many of the lawyers in this law firm. So that's kind of the background. And we, by the way, have a network of lawyers who've already played with it, who have gone through the application, have found it to be as easy to use as we've suggested, and believe at the end of the process, they have 80% of the work process done that they would need in order to finish it off themselves. So I think you're right. Title III. So where I was going with this is, as I sat through many of the meetings that you were in attendance for, some of them with the SEC, state regulators, commercial people, one of the ultimate concerns of Title III that you're well aware of is that this is not economically viable, because if you're raising those sums of money, it's too much transactional cost in order to support raising of that money. We've done something about that, and we feel really good about that, as well as, I think you're correct, there will be audit solutions that will also drop the cost. And I do believe the SEC is mulling over in a very serious way whether or not there's something to do with the elimination of that audit requirement for certain members of the population in the Title III environment.
Yeah, it'd be great if they simply acknowledge that it's absurd to do an audit on a business that was founded 90 days ago or 180 days ago.
Right. I think they'll acknowledge it in a different way than you're suggesting. They won't call it absurd, but
really,
they will come up with a new way. They will limit when its applicability.
Yes, that's probably wise. You see why You see why I do this, and I'm not a regulator. I'm just not smart enough for that. But listen, let's talk about how investors will use this. What do they get when they're looking at a PPM that was prepared via your iDisclose system?
The purpose of any disclosure document, whether or not it's for Title III, a Reg A Plus 1A filing, a 506B filing, or a registration statement generally, it's so that the investor is fully informed and comfortable at the time that they're making their investment. They need to understand what the business opportunity is in great detail. They need to know who the people are in great detail. What are their previous engagements and accomplishments, particularly as it relates to hopefully the same business that's being brought forward in this particular PPM, private placement memorandum. How much people are being paid? What are the historic performance of this opportunity? If it's not a 6-week-old new tech company, but it's actually in Title III, I think a lot of companies that'll be raising money are expansion capital companies that have operations that are doing a debt financing and may have a couple of years of operating history where you need to include numbers, and it can explain things that way. So the operating history will be described. There will be a cap table. Cap table is obviously a hot button issue where you need to understand who owns what, when, whether or not they're options or convertible securities. Our program does that, and in a very detailed way that investors will be comfortable is market standard. One of the concerns which you're getting to is in Title III, and also truthfully so far in the early days of Reg A Plus filings, there is inconsistent disclosure. Some of the Reg A Plus filings have been bounced by the SEC because they were non-compliant. This product will be compliant, consistent, and more importantly, now you're going to get into the nuances and the subtleties of securities laws, which many folks are not fully conversant on. We looked at not just how do you technically comply with the rules and the disclosure requirements that the SEC has in Title III, but from 25 years of my experience and many others here, what are the issues that investors care about? What are the things that they get angry about when they're not there? What are the things that regulators and commercial litigators love to pick on if, in fact, they're not disclosed? Related party transactions. Probably one of the hot button issues where if I'm starting a small business and I want to use my spouse's or significant other's business for printing something and I overpay for that, that's a concern that the investor has. This program fleshes that out. There are a whole litigation history. Anything that we think could ultimately be a concern for the investor, we believe this application enables an entrepreneur that may not be as conversant in those subtle issues and risk factors that their lawyer hopefully will then capture many times, but we think our program does that. And the last thing that we think we've done very well is as the entrepreneur is filling out information from page 1, we are intelligently capturing the information, Devin, and highlighting as those questions are being answered, and there are about 200 questions that an entrepreneur has to answer. Do they result in our populating the risk factors section with unique risks associated with the way the entrepreneur answered the question, as if you and I were having an interview? And then at the end of the day, we believe that that creates the framework, 80% of the work product for the lawyer to finish it off. If
that's really, really great. And it's exciting to finally have this accelerated. The world has needed this for a long time, long before the advent of crowdfunding. It's needed a tool to help entrepreneurs shoulder more of the work quite logically for preparing a private placement memorandum, because they are the experts on the business. The lawyers are the experts on the law. 80% of what's in a PPM is about the business, right?
Right.
So you finally found the way to shift that burden in the direction it belongs and allow the lawyers to lawyer and not become business experts on a client business. So I think it's really brilliant. Now, let's talk about platforms. Do you anticipate platforms incorporating this as an option or a requirement? How do you see working with platforms?
So for Title III, yes. We think that we will be a preferred provider in order so that the cost of the capital will be reduced. I don't know that they will require it always. Some platforms will require it because they also want standardization, which we think this product provides. So Title III, there is a very clear pathway towards platforms wanting to embrace and adopt iDisclose. Intrastate crowdfunding for the very same reason. It also protects the platforms in a way that the certain other platforms that don't require this level of disclosure, because it's mandated, as you know, in Title III, what the disclosure requirements are. Same thing in an intrastate crowdfunding environment. For 506B and C, because you're selling to accredited investors, except for the 30, if you choose to take advantage of the 35 non-accredited investor carve out in 506B, in which case you should use this. But those Title II platforms or 506B platforms usually sell securities off a PowerPoint presentation and not a full disclosure document. We understand why that is, although we think that as these platforms become more regulated by FINRA, they ought to give serious consideration to embracing what we're doing, because we think it will give comfort when there's a FINRA audit, even though, again, it's still not required. But what we're also doing for those platforms, recognizing they want to keep the cost of capital low, is we're creating just a risk factor package for those platforms so that the entrepreneur can use the same sort of technology to come up with risk factors. And then you marry that with the PowerPoint presentation that they've already done. So that's for Title II platforms. That's for Title III platforms. For folks who are involved in Reg A+, the tool isn't currently engineered to be a 1A, Form 1A compliant tool. So we don't think we'll have a relationship in the short term there. But we also think regular broker dealers who we've already spoken to will be using it. We think incubators will embrace it. But most importantly, and this is lost on some people as not being obvious, we're not disrupting the legal profession. We are embracing lawyers and saying, you should use this with your entrepreneurs. You should say to your entrepreneurs, if you use this, we will cost less. And the lawyers will then get more entrepreneurial clients, because many law firms can't deliver these services in a low-cost way, but they'd love to have the long-term relationship of these entrepreneurs. This is a very market-friendly way of all law firms to do that.
It really does seem exciting to me, and a perfect solution for lawyers to attract clients who will struggle to pay today, but may grow into huge clients down the road. And
totally believe that.
Much easier for a big law firm to win that business if there's a way to actually achieve some efficiency instead of just discounting their work.
Correct. So we've had a couple of partners at regional firms share with us their experience where they loved what an entrepreneur was doing. They wanted to support them. And then they felt that the burden shifted to the law firm because they did so much money. Whereas once they learned of this tool and recognized its value, they believe that they're going to use it for business development themselves. Yes.
Yeah, it really is an exciting idea, and I'm excited to see it roll out and be successful, because I think it will help entrepreneurs. Doug, I want to take a few minutes with you while I've got you and ask some sort of personal questions, because of my admiration for you. I look up to you, and I think a lot of people look up to you, especially in the crowdfunding space. You've become perhaps the sage on crowdfunding. And I wonder if you would tell us who you admire, who you look up to.
I'm going to limit my answer to one person, and I'm also not going to give socially responsible admiration to individuals who are, there's so many. So I'm limiting it to somebody who I think is applicable to my experience in the Jobs Act, if you don't mind. And he, as an individual, he may not have been the nicest guy, okay? So back that out, but I think he had vision, I think he had determination, and I think he accomplished something, and it's a very New York-centric story, Devin, and his name is Robert Moses. Robert Moses, in the early part of last century, when cars were becoming more prevalent and populating cities and there was congestion, he had the vision to recognize that there needed to be networks of roads in wealthy people's neighborhoods, in poor neighborhoods, and even though he was not well liked and he created a lot of friction, he believed in what he was doing. He did it because he thought it was for the betterment of the community and society at large, and he made his impact. And when you look around the city of New York and you drive and you travel, it's not just thoroughfares and drives and roads, it's bridges, it's tunnels. He really had an impact, and I was always impressed by that.
That is inspiring. That's a great example, and I assure you, no one has ever used that particular example. Is it Robert Moses?
Yes, I struggled with it as I thought about it because I wanted to talk about my father, who I have nothing but admiration for. But I thought Robert Moses was applicable to my journey on the Jobs Act. And I know you've watched me in action in the Jobs Act, and it's not necessarily logical that I was the person necessarily who was going to spend as much time on the last 3 years as I have. But there is, if you need to read the book about Robert Moses, because it's extraordinary what he accomplished, actually.
That's great. I will do that. Now, you could be doing anything. And even within the legal field, even within the securities arena, there are all kinds of opportunities to make money and do good. Why have you chosen to focus on the Jobs Act issues over the last 3 years? Why has that been so important to you?
Very much for the same reason things drive you, and I've watched what you do and how you accomplish it, and every day you feel good about what you do. And if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't do what I do in all my securities practices, actually. But I have made a career out of alternative finance, and alternative finance up until the Jobs Act always was for people who were out of the mainstream finance at the high levels of finance. So not necessarily doing good things for everybody and the democratization of capital. But when I read the Jobs Act, I found the Title III provisions that your friend and mine, Sherwood Neese and Jason Best, spent so much time giving to this country, in my mind, and getting Congress and the president to sign it into law. I felt compelled. I call it my public service. I think it's enlightened. I think it's got value. I also understood fully what resistance it was going to meet on its implementation from regulators, the established sources of capital, investor protection advocates, all of which, unfortunately, we met. And we met them with a strong storm of wind. But notwithstanding that, my determination to make it happen has been unyielding, whether it's Robert Moses-like or Devin Thorpe-like. I believe in it. I'm passionate about it. And I think it's going to result in very good things for individuals and the country at large.
Now, I couldn't share your passion more, and I'm so glad that you would take a minute to share that with us. Now, one last thing. You're a high impact guy. You're making a difference in the world. You're making a difference to people. You're doing good. Everyone who's watching this wants to do more good, have more impact. Give us one impact hack. Give us something that we can do, something we can use to have more impact ourselves.
I think iDisclose actually brings the conversation back to where it ought to be. Most law firms wouldn't do something that arguably disrupts their own business model. I'm doing it, we're doing it because it's right-minded, it's timely, it's necessary to support Title III in this case, and I think you have to not listen to conventional wisdom when there are things that need to be done. And there's so many things that need to be done. I read the papers every day, and I'm aghast by what I see and read. And everybody, it's easy for me in the securities context because I've got that standing at this point. It's taken 25 years to get here, but I'm always now, it's infectious. I want to find the next thing. So I've gone from Title III to iDisclose, and I assure you there's going to be something right behind it, because once you've tasted it, you want to keep going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Before you go, Doug, tell us how people can learn more about iDisclose, how they can get their hands on it and start using it.
Well, iDisclose.com is the website. There's also a video clip on there that demonstrates the tool a little bit for those who would like to see it. You can follow iDisclose on Twitter. It's iDisclose. I guess it's at iDisclose. We're also, we'd love for you to like us on Facebook. Or you can follow Georgia Quinn individually, or Douglas Ellenoff individually. And we would welcome that, and we need followers and people to help us on this mission to make sure it's successful. So thank you.
All right. Doug, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. We wish you every success in this project.
Devin, thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
All righty. Let's do some good.